Hi friends, I'm back with chapter 5 of Socks. And if you remember yesterday when we finished chapter 4, Socks was feeling really great. He got all the love and attention that he's been wanting from Mrs. Risley, the sitter. And so today, in chapter 5, we're about to meet a new character, and we'll see how Socks does with this character, as chapter 5 is called A Visit from Nana. A puzzling and, to Socks, inconvenient change took place in the behavior of his mistress, Mrs. Bricker, who usually spent the least possible time housekeeping, now upset the whole household by a thorough cleaning. Socks had to rewash his paws after he walked across the kitchen floor wet from the mop. The vacuum cleaner drove him from one room to another, and the smell of the ammonia that Mrs. Bricker used to wash the windows drove him out of the house. The only good that came from all this house cleaning was the disappearance of dust from under the bed. Socks could now retreat in safety without sneezing. Cooking came next. Mrs. Bricker dumped Socks out the back door, so he would not be underfoot. He watched from the windowsill a while. She made a molded salad, experimented with cake mixes, and tried meatloaf recipes. Not long afterward, Mr. Bricker, carrying luggage, walked into the house with a thin, brisk woman whom he called Mom, but referred to as Nana. Mrs. Bricker's mother had arrived to spend her 2 weeks' vacation visiting her son and family. Socks could tell right away that Nana was no Mrs. Risley. He sniffed her luggage for a clue as to its contents, and then turned his back on all the greetings and washed himself. Exclamations of, Nana's precious is a big boy. Yes, he is, and he looks just like his father when he was the same age, boasted Nana and bored Socks. Nana, unlike Mrs. Risley, did not understand the importance of cats. After Mr. Bricker's mother had admired her grandson, given the family presents, and been taken on a tour of the house, she said, Bill, I didn't know you kept a cat. Socks sensed all eyes were on him and looked up from him washing. He saw that Charles William was sitting on his mother's lap staring at his grandmother's shining hair, which was the color of iced tea. Good old Socks, he's quite a character, said Mr. Bricker. Then, to change the subject, he remarked, What have you done to your hair? It looks different. That's between me and my hairdresser. Nana smiled and changed the subject back again. Are you sure it's a good idea, keeping a cat when there's a baby in the house? Mrs. Bricker was quick to defend their pet. Socks is a clean, healthy cat, and we love him. He's a member of the family. Socks delicately washed the pink pads on his feet. Nana was not convinced. Some babies are allergic to cats. Not our boy, said Mrs. Bricker. Charles William hasn't shown any signs of allergy. She took hold of her son's big toe and said, He's a big, healthy boy. Yes, he is. Charles William, who was drooling because he was teething, looked pleased. This little piggy went to market, said Mrs. Bricker, wiggling his toesy toes. Ugh, said Charles William. But aren't you afraid the cat might scratch the baby? Persisted Nana, her glance resting on a frayed corner of the loopy upholstery where Socks sharpened his claws. Not really, said Mrs. Bricker. I do keep an eye on him when they're in the same room, but he's very patient. The little girl next door's name is Tiffy, and he's patient with her too. When she picks him up around the middle, he doesn't even struggle. He just goes limp until she puts him down, and then he runs away. You can't be too careful around a baby. Nana was not persuaded that Socks should remain a member of her son's family. Socks soon found the grandmother's visit a trial. Everything he did was wrong. When he tried to jump on her lap, his claws snagged in her knit dress, and he was scolded. Her nylon stockings dancing over the heat vent as they dried in the bathroom were irresistible to him, and he could not understand why she felt he had misbehaved when he pulled them down and played with them. Couldn't she understand that a cat needed to play? When Nana settled on the couch to knit a sweater for her grandson, Socks was so fascinated by the movement of her knitting needle that he had to jump up beside and watch. She eyed him with disapproval, but when he sat very, very still, the way he sat while watching a bug crawl across the floor, she did not object. He did not take his eyes from those flashing needles until, with one quick swipe of his paw, he reached out and hooked the head of the knitting needle in his claws. The needle slid out of the yarn and flipped to the coffee table with a clatter. "Now see what you made me do," said Nana crossly. "I just dropped 94 stitches." Mrs. Risley would not have spoken to Socks in such a tone of voice. "Isn't it funny the way cats are always attracted to people who don't like them?" said Mrs. Bricker. Socks's feelings were hurt when she picked him up and set him down outside the front door. As the days passed, Nana grew more critical of Socks. If he scratched, she was sure he was crawling with fleas that might bite Charles Williams. Every time Socks watched and waited until he could get his paws on Brown Bear, she took it away from him and brushed it off. If her grandson sneezed, she was sure he was allergic to cats. She was constantly brushing cat hair off the couch, and one evening she plucked a cat hair out of her salad. She was polite, though, and did not call attention to it, but the Brickers noticed. Nights were hardest of all, because the Brickers' house was small. Nana had to sleep on the couch in the living room, while Socks, who considered the couch his bed, was shut in the laundry. Socks resented this arrangement. Every evening he complained himself hoarse, even though Mr. Bricker interrupted the conversations in the living room to shout, "Socks, be quiet!" Socks lay yowling on the hard floor and groped under the door with his paw. He sat up and threw his shoulder against the door. When nothing, absolutely nothing, would free him, his last act before settling down on the sweatshirt was to plow kitty litter over the floor so someone would have to sweep it up in the morning. Socks became so discouraged that each night he yowled less and sulked more, until one moonlit night, when the household had settled into silence, the laundry was so light that Socks was restless. He jumped out of his box, extended his paws as if he were bowing, enjoyed a good stretch, and then threw his shoulder against the door, which this time surprised him by silently opening enough for a cat to walk through. Socks was free. He padded through the kitchen and dining room to the living room, where Nana was asleep. The pupils of his eyes widened in the dim light, and as he was about to spring up on the blanket beside her, he noticed her suitcase lying open in the corner of the room. Nana had not understood his curiosity about her luggage and had not allowed him to look inside. Socks trotted across the carpet and, after a cautious sniff, stepped into the suitcase. The nylon slip felt smooth to his paw pads and much softer than that old sweatshirt. Socks was about to use the suitcase for a bed when a ghostly object looming on the desk caught his attention. He stood motionless, staring up at something white gleaming in the darkness. When it did not move, he could not smell it, nor he sprang up to the top of the desk to investigate. There he discovered an astonishing thing: Nana's hair. There, in the midst of Mrs. Bricker's books and papers, sat the hair on the faceless white head. He had never seen such a sight in his life. His head cocked to one side, Socks patted the soft fibers with his curious paw. He was fascinated. He patted with the other paw. Here was something to play with, and Socks was lonely for play. And you can see there's Socks beginning to play with Nana's wig. Oh my goodness. With extended claws, Socks hooked the hair from the styrofoam head and batted it over the edge of the desk and to the floor. He headed, rolled over to the edge of the desk too, and landed beside the hair with a soft thump, which made Nana stir in her sleep. Socks sprang on the hair, caught it in his claws, tossed it into the air, and let it fall to the carpet. Then he pounced. He hugged the soft bundle of fibers with his front paws and kicked it strong with his hind feet. He rolled over the hair, still clutched to his body. With his movements muffled by the carpet, he tussled and scuffled and wrestled. He dropped the hair, hid behind the chair, and pounced again. He pretended to ignore it before he surprised it by catching it with his claws and tossing it into the air. Finally, Socks grew bored of the game. Nana's hair would not fight back. He dropped it in a patch of moonlight and settled for the night on the nylons and lace in Nana's suitcase. And there's where we're going to stop for today. So it'll be interesting to see when everyone wakes up in the morning what their reaction is when they see Nana's hair on the floor, because I'm guessing Socks isn't going to be able to get that back up onto the desk where he found it since he knocked it down. So Socks might be in for a little bit of trouble. So keep up your great drawings, friends. I'm so proud. I know I've checked in with most of you either by phone or by email, and I'm hearing a lot of great things that are happening at home. You're working so hard. You're doing the iReady. You're following along with the read alouds, and that makes Mr. Cyrus really, really, really happy to know that you're all doing great things while we can't be together. So truly, friends, keep up the awesome work. I'm so proud, and I'll be back tomorrow with more of Socks. Bye-bye.